Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. As you've heard, I help run a makerspace by the name GearBox. This is a makerspace in the heart of Nairobi. What does a makerspace do? GearBox is a hardware prototyping space, and out of research which was done 5 years ago, it was noted that it is difficult for any hardware innovator to put a product out in the market due to the high cost of prototyping. So a couple of innovators came together, raised some funds, and basically went ahead and equipped a workshop with state-of-the-art rapid prototyping equipment with the likes of 3D printing in additive manufacturing and CNC as far as industrial robots are concerned. Now, I'm going to present to you advances made in digital fabrication at this space and robotics. It's very, very hard to talk about industrial revolution and the fourth industrial revolution in particular without talking about what happened with the last industrial revolutions. As the old adage goes, for us to know where we are going, it's important to know where we come from. Now, I've put together what I call the scorecard as far as the African technology journey is concerned. And I've put, with the first industrial revolution, Africa sort of failed. And this is why. With the first industrial revolution, it was basically, it happened in the 1800th century, as most of you would know, and it was underlined by the invention of the steam engine and mechanization. And in the 21st century, what has Africa done with this technology? Well, you could argue that you can't blame Africa because most of the African countries are young, about 60 or 50 years old after independence. But what about the second industrial revolution, which was characterized by mass production when Henry Ford discovered the assembly line? How many assembly lines do we have in Africa? Well, that's why I put a fail in the scorecard. But then with the third industrial revolution, we begin to see Mother Africa slowly embracing technology. This was the age of computer automation. And we've seen with the speakers that have gone before me, acknowledging that M-Pesa and mobile platform, which is innovation in this arena, has basically come of age. We've done well, but we can definitely do better. But then to understand deeper why we need to look at the fourth industrial revolution, we need to investigate why has Africa played how it has played its role and why it has performed dismally in this stage. And a research was done 4 years ago, which had some very staggering statistics. It basically investigated the population employed in the informal sector as a fraction of a country's working force. Now, the countries where this statistic, or rather research was done, they included most of the countries in East Africa, including others like Liberia and Namibia. And it shows an inverted pyramid in front of you, where a staggering 80% of the population is in the informal sector. Now, what does this particular population that is in the informal sector, what does it do, right? The population, most of it basically, they do manufacturing. But it's not manufacturing in the scale of what is happening in motor vehicle industries in the West. It is small-scale manufacturing. In Kenya, for instance, we have a sector that is called the Juakali sector. Now, this sector is named so as homage to the harsh conditions that these particular individuals work under. They basically work under the hot sun right by the roadside where they ply their trade. And the picture here, they say pictures speak 1,000 words. And this particular picture shows the harsh conditions under which this particular group of people work under. Now, if you look closely, you'll see a number of things, and mainly almost the absence of technology. And we sought to investigate how come in the 21st century, when technology has become cheap and accessible, you still find people plying their trade in this manner. And the solution lies with technology, with capacity building as far as exposing them to the proper education is concerned, and even better, it has to do with policy. So we need to make policies that actually enable these people compete with the West. And in this advent of the fourth industrial revolution, there isn't a much better time. Now, how do we do this? Like many other African countries, Kenyans' enrollment into the technical, vocational, and training institutes has always lagged behind. It has done that at the expense of enrollment in the universities. In other words, you have more people enrolling to be engineers and equipping themselves to actually work in the formal sector, while the majority of the population is actually struggling in the informal sector. Now, the number that you're seeing in front of you, 275,139, this is a number that the Kenyan Deputy President mentioned a week ago, very excitedly. Why? Because for the first time in Kenya's history, we had the enrollment in the TVET institutions surpass the enrollment in the university and higher institutions of learning. Now, this is insignificant, and I'm going to demonstrate why in a little bit. You see, in most developed countries, in Europe mainly, you have the pyramid that is not inverted. In other words, you have the people in the formal jobs support everybody else. So you need a bigger number at the base of your pyramid. It is not quite the same in Africa. And this is all the more reason we need to embrace the fourth industrial technology. But what is the fourth industrial technology, right? It has been defined as the fusion of the physical, digital, and biological spheres, mainly characterized by some technologies which have been labeled as the fourth industrial technologies. And they include robotics, UAV, machine learning and artificial intelligence, additive manufacturing, and Internet of Things. Of course, there are others like blockchain, but I chose to dwell on this for a couple of reasons. I mentioned that I work in a hardware innovation space. And these disciplines are the disciplines that we are using to build the capacity so that we can equip the local communities, develop machines and innovation that will solve common African problems. Now, if you look at robotics, for instance, and Internet of Things as a technology, there are a couple of areas that we could use such technology. And we've had quite interesting developments in the African context. We've had CNC, which stands for Computer Numerical Controlled Equipment, as a discipline take effect because we have a huge following in terms of the open source community. And this has taken Africa quite a bit of time, but there's a growing makerspace community across the country. It's not just in Kenya, I believe it's here in Tanzania too. I know for a fact it's there in Uganda, Ghana, Nigeria, and many other countries. So, in my opinion, I think the African community has actually done well, even though a lot more needs to be done in embracing the fourth industrial revolution. I'm going to demonstrate to you real evidence as to the impact that this phenomena is actually taking place. The other thing is about the additive manufacturing. Now, additive manufacturing, you can probably say it's synonymous with 3D printing. 3D printing being a technology whereby you send a model in a three-dimensional form to be printed in a tactile manner so that you can hold it in your hand, has actually grown in leaps and bounds, and its application from architectural to medical fields has actually been quite awesome. And this has given rise to a growing maker and innovation culture based on the fourth industrial revolution technologies. Now, the picture in this particular slide shows an Arduino. Arduino is an open source development board that encapsulates the hardware microcontroller technology. And if you're going to do any meaningful robotics and automation, you at least need to know how to program one of these. The next slide shows the spread of this phenomena across the African continent. Now we have a phenomena called the Fab Labs, which came out of the MIT, that is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in the US. And we have actually seen this curriculum being taught across the continent. And as a matter of fact, we have these sprouting fabrication centers across the continent. In Ghana, for instance, they're using that capacity to self-employ themselves. We have a company in Ghana that is building speakers using an industrial robot, otherwise known as a CNC router. You basically place your MDF, which is a type of material, on your bed, and through digital fabrication means you are able to cut out the different pieces that you need to assemble your speaker. The machine that you are seeing here was built at our space in GearBox by one of the startup companies by the name Protec. And the machine is, again, a CNC machine, but it's a CNC plasma machine, meaning that it can be used to translate designs out of software onto sheet metal. Now, with technologies like this, you can imagine the common Juakali individual working by the roadside in harsh conditions, what they can do with this kind of technology. This particular machine is also known as an industrial robot, and it's another of the machine that has actually seen huge absorption rate due to open sourcing the Mark III software that is actually used to control this group of machines. So the same Mark III software can be used to build CNC laser cutters, wood routers, and it can also be used to build 3D printers that use clay to form sculptures. We already have a startup in Kenya that is already developing that as a technology to see if it can be given to artists so that they can scale their businesses and have better income. You remember I showed you a picture of the Juakali people working, right? Now, what do these Juakali artisans build? I mentioned that you are not about to see the scale of production that happens in the motor vehicle industry at Tesla or Nissan, for instance. They do fabricate common household items like frying pans, barbecue grills, and wheelbarrows. Now, I don't know about here in Kenya, but here in Tanzania, but in Kenya you find wheelbarrows being used a lot in construction site. Now, most of the wheelbarrows are actually imported, and they're imported from the Orient, where the quality, we keep on complaining it's not good, but you need to compare that with the quality that our own people are creating for you to see the sense. Now, if you look at the physical structure of a common wheelbarrow, you find that there is a tube, which serves as the frame, and then you have the trough and the wheel. Now, these are the items that our Juakali people are creating. And the quality, if you look at the tube, you can see there are dents. Now, this is evidence of the quality issues that come about due to lack of the necessary equipment that these people need. And I sought out to investigate why is this the case. Now, if you look at common CNC pipe benders that exist, they're really expensive and they still require a bit of sophistication. Now, you probably need about an engineering degree for you to be able to design tubular frames in your computer-aided design software like Fusion 360 or SolidWorks, so that you can use that particular software with your machine. So I sought out, as an innovator, to build a machine that these people can use without necessarily having to be trained on the use of computer-aided design technologies. Now, a number of people may not be happy, but that's why I emphasize that we need to build technology for local consumption. I know the challenges that the Juakali people have as far as education and capacity is concerned. They earn a daily wage for a day's work. So if you tell them to set aside some time so that they can learn a technology, then you're asking them to go without food. This is something that they can't afford. So I went ahead to design a machine that is actually used, that will actually be used by these people without them having to program in a computer-aided design technology. And how the machine works, and you'll see that in a minute, you have an analog platform with a dial, and because this group of people understand, because they understand angular and linear measurements, they can quickly produce what they want manually using the machine, but the machine will record that as a macro and play it back, giving them a sense of mass manufacturing. This is important because what is really lacking in the Kenyan or in the African setup is the mass manufacturing. We've not been able to make the achievements that the third industrial revolution and the second industrial revolution, with the advent of the assembly line, to basically make the gains that we ought to. This is the machine, and the picture on the right shows myself there putting it together. And then in the next slide, yes, you can basically see the machine. It's still a proof of concept. This was done in our space, whereby we were able to actually run. Yeah, we were able to actually run the machine to produce some good quality bends. Sorry. Oh, thank you. Yes. So. Yes, as you could see from the video, the quality is pretty good. Just to wind up, developments have also been made in the additive manufacturing, technology. This is 3D forms made out of MRI scans of real patients. There's a company that has actually printed these ones out, and they've been used by medical practitioners to prepare for surgeries. The one on at the top there is basically a facial reconstruction surgery model that was used to prepare for such an operation. The one below is hip replacement surgery, and the same scans for a different patient were used to prepare for that particular implant. I wind up with looking at the challenges that Kenyans, or rather Africans, face. The logistical challenge is a challenge that every African country can identify with. Today, or rather this week, we are going to have examinations start in most parts of the country. And this is how examinations are delivered during the rainy season, which happens to coincide with this examination period. Now, the fourth industrial revolution technologies, as the unmanned aerial vehicles, can actually be used to mitigate some of these challenges. A successful example in Rwanda, the Zipline project, has been used, as you may know, to actually fast track, or rather to overcome the challenge of logistics as far as delivery of critical medical supplies is concerned. I would like to leave you with a quote from Gary Coleman, and he said, "The fourth industrial revolution is still in its nascent state, but with the swift pace of change and its disruption to business and society, the time to join in is now." Thank you very much.